By land. Once upon a time, May Bank Holiday 1964 to be precise, 6 months before the Bowmore spirit, which was destined for the Fino casks, was distilled, a low-loader truck set out from Renfrew, bound for the Isle of Islay. Its load was a new boiler, commissioned for Bowmore Sheriff Distillery, as it was then, and made by Babcock and Wilcox. It was the start of an eventful journey. Boilers have a working life, and the one transported by the aptly named Big Beanie was not only a replacement for its pre-war forerunner, it was also a lot bigger in order to cope with an increased demand for the dram. For the same reason, Bowmore had commissioned a brand new still, and a couple of McKelvey lorries were simultaneously heading for the west coast port of Rue to meet up with the Muckle truck, which was, by the way, one of the very few low-loaders at the time big enough to take such a load. The journey involved crossing Glasgow, passing the Kelvin Hall there, so the choice of a bank holiday Monday was a wise one, with not too many Morris Minors, Humbers and Hillman Imp cars on the road. At Rue. Now anyone who knows anything about crossing the sea to the Western Isles will wonder why the trucks were bound for Rue. The answer is that Rue is a naval base, and the whole undertaking of getting the boiler and still to Islay involved the combined forces of the Royal Navy and the Army. These were the days before the roll-on, roll-off ferries, so an Army landing craft was ideal in the circumstances. The circumstances, in fact, were that such an operation as this had never been carried out before. That's McKelvey's foreman with the megaphone. He stayed dressed like that throughout the expedition, ruined a good suit. That's Tim Morrison, one of the Morrisons of Morrison Bowmore, who had, quite prophetically, the last-minute good sense to ensure the whole operation. The thought of the Army and the Navy being involved, added to the fact that the transporters needed to be back on the mainland within a 3-day time frame, made him secure the necessary cover, just before 5:30 on Friday afternoon. Something else might have prompted him as well, and that was the not insignificant fact that Bowmore's distillery manager on Islay, Jim McCall, had strongly recommended that the sailing should take place a week later because of the tides. And Jim was a man who knew his tides. But he was not Royal Navy. And besides, Bowmore had to fit in with the Army's schedule of exercises. The disembarking armoured vehicles, including a 1946 Centurion Mark V tank and a Scammell Explorer, were en route north, all in another day's secret work, defending the realm. By water. From Rue, the landing craft took some 12 hours to reach Loch-and-Dal. It set off around 7 in the evening, and a glorious May evening it was too. Distillery personnel and McKelvey boss, foreman and drivers were all accommodated on board, and it's reported that quite a few drams were down that night. But it's well known how easy it is for stories to get embroidered. Some remember this eagle-eyed officer as being somewhat straight-laced and severe, charging everyone that this was a serious operation and daring anyone to step out of line. Surely not. Maybe some folks' memory doesn't serve them too well. What is incontestable is that by the morning, the weather had changed, and the distillery loomed out of the mist, dreich and a little foreboding. At Bowmore, 0900 hours on the Tuesday morning, the landing operation is all set to commence. But, just as Jim McCall had warned, the tide is not high enough, which meant the captain couldn't bring the craft in any nearer than about a mile out from the shore. However, not unduly perturbed, he sets out in a launch to do a recce. That's Tim Morrison again, still looking chipper. And there are some of the boys of Bowmore. Of course, this was long before the McTaggart Leisure Centre opened. Ah, getting ready for action. Ringside seats are taken. Floating ducks, not sitting. That's James Mottram, owner of the Seaview Hotel, who played host to this jolly boatload. He was about to see his bar takings jump alarmingly. The Scammell Explorer, which had accompanied the expedition for winching purposes, was first off. Made it through the water. That's Jim McCall, not a man to score points, looking as if he's giving the Navy the benefit of the doubt. And here's the truck with the all-important still, done up with a weatherproof apron. And yes, success. That's Sean O'Leary, a well-known local artist. Wellies and kilt were his standard outfit. Here comes the other truck, with the rest of the precious still being pulled by a hawser located within the distillery. All means of transport were on show that day. These boys might have taken a tip from O'Leary, who used to sail to the pub in his canoe, a miracle built out of an old oil drum. And yes, the second truck is ashore. Another success. Now it's Big Beanie's turn. This is where the fun really begins. And this is where, if memory serves us well,
basically, the idea is that the lorry is being pulled, is being winched ashore, but it doesn't have enough power in the main tractor to pull it. So consequently, it stops, and they're frightened that the hawser will break and cause quite a lot of damage there. They're basically trying to refix the hawser and have another go at it. But it's well and truly stuck. One of the other things is the enormous amount of work that so many people did to recover the situation, to make sure that the boiler was put into the distillery. And you know, these guys worked sleep from 6 in the morning until 11, 12 at night. It was a very disciplined operation as well, and well directed, and tremendous teamwork between the Navy personnel and McKelvey's. I don't think there's a lot of the distillery personnel actually involved, but James McCall, the manager, did have a considerable input to the logistics as well. That is me, by the way. Hellish. I felt sick. I felt the whole thing was coming to an end. I think we're almost the next day here. Yes, we are, because if I remember correctly, it was a better day the next day. As you see by now, the tide has risen a bit. They hadn't a clue what they were going to do now. It was discussed between the McKelvey personnel and the Navy. There was a chap who worked for McKelvey who was their sort of works manager, who was quite outstanding in terms of A, the amount of time he worked on it, but B, his attention to details, and it was actually he who, I think, I'm pretty sure, created the plan as to what was going to happen. I know what they're doing. They're putting netting down to try and make a road to soften the weight or distribute the weight more evenly. But what they've now got to do is get the trailer and the boiler back on board the boat, because they've abandoned any thought that they're going to lug it onto the island. These ramps are tank ramps. The plan was to get it back on board the boat and readjust the load factor, and then hopefully get the boat much closer to the distillery. I think that was a McKelvey foreman. If that boiler hadn't got back on board, I hate to think what we would have had to do, because there was no units around that could possibly have fired up the distillery. And I think this is one of the problems that we realised. Being in an island, you're isolated, and if you don't have the raw materials or the machinery to operate the unit, you're dead. Now they're winching the trailer back on board. There's seawater damage, both on the paint. I can't remember whether the thing went again, but it was in a pretty sorry state, as indeed was the boiler. This is where the power of the winch on the boat certainly made a difference. The reason that the vehicles were driving through the shallows was because the military had made a mistake in terms of their timing, and they had been advised by James McCall, the local distillery manager, who was a weather expert as well, and he could talk to you about the tides, he could talk to you about forecasting the weather, and was very, very rarely wrong. And he said that they were arriving a week before they should have. And of course he was proven correct. As you can see, there was still a fair bit still that had to be landed. They winched the boiler back on board, and if my memory serves me correctly, they got the Big Beanie back on board and then had another go at it. The tractor there was pretty critical to the operation. Now they've got the boat a lot closer. Now they winched up the trailer, and as you can see, they've winched the boiler back on board. Then the tractor lifted up the boiler, put it back on the trailer, and linked up Big Beanie again. Now they're trying to winch the boat closer to the distillery. That's Callum Gillis, and that's Anne Lorne Gillis. You know, the Gaelic singers? Oh, nobody thought it was going to work. It was, we reckon we could be here for another month. I think one of the points here is that these people were working under incredibly difficult circumstances. Apart from the sea being as cold as it was, they were working in the cold water for 3-4 hours at a time. They were able to bring the tank landing craft very, very much closer into the distillery. And when they started the next operation, they were so much closer to the distillery that with comparatively little effort, they got Big Beanie into the distillery. The truck started up actually soon after it was submerged, when I think they did some tinkering with the engine, but comparatively little. And of course the army truck was used at the other side in the distillery to add the momentum which was required to pull the boiler up the ramp and into the distillery. And did the trucks go back with the landing craft? Yes, they did, and we've never seen them since.
All's well that ends well. And fittingly, here's Bowmore's famous round church, built with no corners, they say, so the devil can't hide. And maybe our trio here of distillery man and singers are off to give thanks for the unique birth of the spirit of '64. Or maybe they're just about to turn right for a wee dram.